Thank you, thank you. Well, good morning. That's some energy in the room. First of all, let me tell you what kind of doctor I am. When I was working on my PhD at Florida State University, go Seminoles, I could overhear my son, who was about 8 years old, outside the study talking with a little neighbor boy. And the little neighbor boy asked him, he said, is it true, is your dad a doctor? And Sean said, yeah, he's a doctor all right, but he's the kind of doctor that doesn't help anybody. So I'm trying to overcome that image here at PBA. Well, it's wonderful to be here. I'm very excited to be on the Orlando campus of PBA and just have been looking forward to this time together. Thank you so much for showing up. As Jeremy said, taking your time to be here and share this time with us. And thank you for the privilege of having a chance to share a little bit about my own story and journey and to talk about servant leadership. It starts with you leading from within. It starts with you, and I might say ends with you, right? Leading from within. Now, when you looked at the program or heard me or Jeremy talk this morning when you first came in, leading from within, what does that mean? What first popped into your head? Leading from within. Turn to your neighbor and share what popped into your head, leading from within. What does that mean? Take another second or two, and then let me call you back together. Give your neighbor a chance to share. All right, let me bring us back together. Leading from within. What did your neighbor share? Anybody? What does it mean? All right, conquering from the inside.
Leading from experiences with integrity.
All right, so your experiences, yourself, but with integrity. Anybody else?
Integrity, values.
Okay, what's important to you, what you really believe? Good, yes. What else? All right. Right. Sort of holding the mirror up a little bit, right? And looking at the real you and dealing with the issues you've got. Good. What else?
Holistically healthy.
All right. So the whole person, not just kind of,
Relational, cognitive,
right. It all ties together, and it starts within.
Listening to the prompting of the Holy Spirit from within.
Okay. All right. So that spiritual dimension is something that takes place within us, right? It's not just out there somewhere. It's inside us. Good. All great. Here's the point I want to make. Your toughest, most difficult leadership challenge is? Exactly. It's not your boss. It's not your co-workers. It's not your customers. It's yourself. It's yourself. And the principle is if you cannot or are not leading and managing yourself effectively, guess what? You're going to have a difficult time leading and managing others effectively. Starts with you. Second question. Who are you really? Who are you really? How do you show up? How do you show up? How do you show up under stress? Right? Anybody can show up when things are going well and lead and have a good time and enjoy, you got great performers, but when there's stress, what happens? It begins to reveal the true character and capability, and often brings out the worst in us. So how do you show up? Are you truly the person you want to be? Are you that person who shows up in a way that is effective? If you're not the person you want to be, if the way you show up, the way you engage people, the way you respond to people, especially under stress, is not getting the results you need to get, who or what needs to change? Right, it's you, isn't it? Here's what Warren Bennett said, one of the leadership gurus out of USC, classic book, Leadership Strategies for Taking Charge, early 2000. Who we are and who we are becoming will determine our effectiveness as leaders. Who we are and who we are becoming will determine our effectiveness as leaders, much more than any skill or technique. We often go to training, we're learning skills and techniques. Bennett is saying, no, it's about who we are and who we are becoming. The process of becoming a leader, he says, is much the same as becoming an integrated human being. Holistic, as Danielle expressed to us. And I would suggest to you that the process of becoming a leader for those of us of faith is also the journey of our own spiritual formation, holistically, in who we are becoming, seeking to follow Christ as our leader. Here's the principle. You can't change anyone else, right? Stop trying to change everybody around you. You can only change yourself, and it starts within you. Here's what Jesus once said. He said, it's not what goes in that corrupts a person, right? It's not what goes in that causes pride and arrogance and greed and all those things we've experienced in leadership. No, it's what's in your heart. It's what's in your heart. That's what really motivates you to serve. So what's in your heart? What's in your heart? As Jeremy put it, what motivates you to serve? Why? Why do you want to be a servant leader? You can't change anyone else. Change starts with you, and there is no improvement without change, right? But some of us don't like to change. Even when that change is good for us, right? Even when we know it's good for us, we don't like to change. We kind of hang on. Anybody remember the definition of insanity? I am sorry to say, some of you are on the edge of. Exactly. Albert Schweitzer, renowned medical missionary in the 1800s in the Congo, said this. He said, example is not the main thing in influencing or leading others. It's the only thing. Example's not the main thing as though it's kind of important among other things. No, it is the only thing. Who we are. How do we show up? What's inside? But I'm sorry to say we have a problem. We have a problem. We are all, and I'm diagnosing here, self-deceived. We are self-deceived. And not just a little bit. A lot. Now, some of us even suffer from what Marshall Goldsmith calls the success delusion. The success delusion. Now, I know you're dying to know, do you suffer from success delusion? So I'm going to do a little diagnosis here. You mind? I'm going to ask you 3 questions. You can answer yes or no. I would recommend answering quietly to yourself. Hi, welcome. Yeah. It might be a little bit embarrassing. Okay, here's the first question. Do you ever overestimate your contribution to a project? Keep it to yourself. Do you ever have an elevated opinion of your professional skills and standing among your peers? Number 3, have you ever exaggerated, just a little bit, your project's impact on profitability? All right, if you answered yes to 1 out of the 3, guess what? You are self-deceived. Because you really should have answered yes to all 3, right? And if you're sitting there shaking your head saying, no, not me, I'm not self-deceived, well, God help you, because you are really in trouble. Evidence would show that the higher we go in leadership, think about this, the higher we go in leadership, the more likely we are to be self-deceived. Marshall Goldsmith notes this. He says, as we move up in leadership, our behavior is reinforced. We begin to think, I behave this way and I'm successful. Therefore, I must be successful because I behave this way. But what is often happening, says Marshall, he says, the more we move up in the organizational ladder, the more employees start to tell us how wonderful we are. Guess what, right? They show up at our meetings. They respond more rapidly to our emails. They answer our phone calls. They even laugh when we start telling jokes. And we go away thinking we're funny. So the key question here is, are you self-deceived? Do you really have an accurate view of yourself? And as we think about servant leadership, are we really serving effectively from the point of view of those we're seeking to serve? Or are we serving out of what we think is servant leadership? Or are we really serving effectively from the point of view of the people we're seeking to serve? Do we recognize where we, not others, need to change to be more effective? We, not others, need to change to be more effective if we're going to be that servant leader. Now, I'm also sorry to say that some of you are like my old hound dog. Anybody got a hound dog? All right. What kind? Foxhound. This was a blue tick hound. All right, I'm going to tell you the story about the old man and the hound dog. Anybody know that story? There's the old man, he's got his hound dog laying by him on the porch. Sun's coming up. He's got his cup of coffee. I mean, life is good. He's in his rocking chair. You know, it doesn't get any better. Well, the mailman comes around the corner, coming up the walkway. He's a new mailman. He starts to come up. He turns the corner. All of a sudden, the hound dog stands up and starts barking, howling, right? Mailman gets all jittery. And the old man says, no, it's all right, come on up. Was he going to bite me? No, it's fine, come on. So, he comes up and he's delivering the mail. He said, well, how come he was howling? The old said, man, well, it's like this. He's laying on a nail. And he lays on that nail and he rubs around a little bit and it hurts. Then he kind of rubs a little bit more and it hurts some more. But he's still laying on the nail. He lays and rubs some more and it hurts some more. And then all of a sudden it starts hurting enough to where he does what? He stands up and House. Blames somebody else, shouts out there, who's causing that pain in my side? And then what does he do? Lays back down on the same damn nail. Some of you are like that hound dog, I'm afraid to say. Think about it. You know deep down inside, you've got some rub there that's been following you around for a while, right? And at a previous place of organization work, you thought, hey, if I just had better employees, I didn't get a chance to choose these people. Or if I had a different supervisor, I would do better. And in fact, it gets so, it gets so painful, then you get fed up enough, well, I'm going to change jobs, and you go to another organization. A couple months go by, all of a sudden you start feeling that rub again, and the same issues are starting to appear with some of those people you're working with that supervisor. Am I speaking the truth here? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody got a nail that's been rubbing on them and they keep laying back down on it? What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? What's the solution? Now, if we really want to know how our leadership impacts people, how can we find out? We could ask, couldn't we? Now, whether they tell us might be a test, right, of our what they perceive as our authenticity. We could get really sophisticated and do a 360. Anybody here had a 360 that you've done? Yeah, I see a lot of heads shaking. Well, I hope you didn't do like I did when I had my first 360. Because if you really want to become aware of your self-deception, do what I did. Well, I went through that 360 and I thought, well, dadgummit, I'm pretty darn good. I'm going to give myself a 10 on vision, because, man, I can really throw it out there. And I'm a good team member, so I'm not perfect, but let me get myself a 9. And I am really a good listener, because I've taken courses on listening, I've read books on listening, I've taught other people. I'm a good listener, so I'm not going to go up to a 10, but 9.5. I got that 360 back, I started reading it, and all of a sudden, there were some scores down there, 5, then it got down to 4, and then there was a 3, and guess what? That 3 was on listening. And I looked at that and I started reading the comments. And of course, this is supposed to be confidential, right? I started reading the comments. I said, I know that's Clara who wrote that. You wait till I get back to the office. She thinks I'm a bad listener. I'm going to show her, what kind of listener I am. Now, the good news is I went home first. I went home and I walked into the door. My wife and kids are sitting there, and I said, can you believe this? People marked me down on this. And I got marked down on listening. I know it's Clara. And, I'm a good listener. My wife and kids looked up at me and said, honey, Dad, duh, are you kidding? You're a terrible listener. I said, no. Yeah, you interrupt people. You never shut up. You don't give people a chance. They start responding. You interrupt them. You're a terrible listener. Really? I mean, it was painful. I'm laughing, but it was painful. It was painful. Well, I'm not going to go, my confession is not going that far. If you start scanning the research, I won't go as far as saying the most important, but certainly among the most important factors of effective leadership and effective development as a leader is self-awareness. Self-awareness. So we have got, all of us, and I don't care how old you are or how much experience you have, it's a constant journey of moving from self-deception to self-awareness. Constant journey. It's certainly for those of us of faith, and we know the role sin plays in our life, and we see what the Bible says about self-deception, it's a constant journey of moving. And I would argue that going from self-deception to self-awareness is a spiritual formation process. And think about it, especially with servant leadership. If we are really trying to serve others from their point of view, we need to ask ourselves the question, not only how we serve, but why we are serving. As Jeremy started out, what really is our motivation for serving? It starts with you, leading from within. Your toughest leadership challenge is going to be you leading yourself, really understanding how you show up, what impact is your style having, and what do you need to change, not others, to be more effective. And recognizing, by God, you are more than likely to be self-deceived. Now, let's go a little deeper. Who are you really? Who are you really? How do you show up? What will your life count for in the end? How will you determine success? What will success mean as you go through your journey of life and leadership? Being a servant leader, leading from within, I would suggest, requires vulnerability in the most personal areas of our lives. Vulnerability. And if we're not willing to be vulnerable, we're going to have a hard time being a servant leader and certainly leading from within. Do a little exercise with me. You've come to this meeting, you got a little pain going on, it's been following you around, sort of like that nail. A little indigestion, maybe a little muscle cramp. You get home, you start complaining to your spouse, that pain, came back, and finally your spouse says, well, doggone it, you've been having that for several weeks, why don't you go to the doctor? All right, you call up, you go to the doctor, you get all the tubes and probes and everything. Tests come back, you get a call from the doctor, and the doctor says, hey, I need you to come in and talk about your results. Well, can't you just tell me? No, you need to come in. You go in, you sit down, you got the doctor, he pulls out the results, and he looks at you, he says, well, I'm not going to mince words. It's really serious. We're estimating that you may only have a year to live. Imagine that happened to you. Maybe it has happened to some of you or to someone you know. If that did happen to you or you've witnessed it, what would you do differently? What would you do differently? What might you do more of? What might you do less of? Turn to your neighbor real quick and just answer that question. What would you do differently if that happened to you? More of or less of? All right, let me bring us back together. What would you do more of? Anybody? Travel. Enjoy something you've wanted to enjoy for a long time. What else? More time with parents. The value of that relationship. What else? Let some go that are toxic and need to be dropped. Yep. What else? There's an honest man. We can start right now. All right, more self-care, right? Because after all,
I think
Okay.
And I want that to be what I truly am passionate about.
All right. Focus on that passion, that motivation that you really want to get involved in.
That might be people, that might be
Yeah.
things that I want
Well.
to do, that I need to do.
Anything you'd do less of?
Don't waste time with like arguments or
Yeah. Why sweat the small stuff? Complaining. This. Yeah.
I'd probably pray a lot more,
Okay.
not just myself,
Okay.
corporately,
All right.
because in a situation like this, you really, if we face this, really face on.
Yeah.
We have two ways we can go here.
Yeah.
The other way is we can really get within ourselves
Okay.
and say, why is this happening to me?
But make the most of the time.
So,
Yep.
absolutely.
Okay. You get another call from the doctor. He says, hey, we've been looking at your test results. I need you to come in. Well, can't you tell me over the phone? No, you got to come in. You go in, you sit down. He looks at you and he says, well, we've been studying your results and we made a mistake. Actually, you only have 30 days to live. Does anything change? Yeah, you might want to get a second opinion. Right. Now, what does this kind of exercise force you to do? Look within, evaluate. What is really important, right? Who am I really? Where am I really going to focus my time? Now, my question to you is, what in the heck are you waiting on? What are you waiting for? How many of us know whether we have 30 days or 30 years? God forbid, it could happen to any of us walking out, driving home, etc. You know, what are we waiting on? What are we waiting on? My mother passed away a couple of years ago, and she was a wonderful lady. I miss her dearly. And as you do at funerals, or at least as I've experienced at funerals, two things. One is it helps you to kind of focus and again start thinking about the temporariness of life and what's important. And then, of course, you tell stories. And we were honoring my mother, celebrating her life, telling stories. And the thing that just jumped out at me so vividly was how she lived what she believed. What she said were her values. What she said was important to her is how she actually behaved, how she lived. What do we call that when people do what they say what they mean, do what they mean? Integrity. Integrity. Anybody here in the construction business? What happens if you don't have integrity in a piece of wood that you're building a house with? It will collapse. Or integrity in a piece of steel that's going up to build a bridge. What's going to happen? It's going to collapse. And it's the same with us. If we don't have that consistency, that alignment, deciding what do we really believe, what really is important, and then aligning how we show up, how we lead, how we operate under stress, how we serve others. We'll be like that person Jesus talks about in the Bible that builds their life, builds their house on a sand that doesn't stand, it washes away, versus the block, the foundation. You're responsible for that, nobody else, right? Are you becoming the person you want to be? The servant leader you want to be? If not, what's preventing you? You can't do anything about the past, but you can change the future. Don't let the past sabotage the current. And that's what happens to a lot of us. We keep going back. We let the past drag us down. Look forward. Allow me to give you one more diagnosis. Here's one thing I think I know about most of you, having shown up for this conference. You are doers. You're going to get it done. And it doesn't matter if the company demands or requires it of you, you're going to put what you need to put in, sacrifice to get it done. And some of you might be closer to that 30 days than you realize. The data would show that 70%, 70, of most of us sitting in this room either are or will suffer from some stress-related disease. 70% of us. Coronary, heart, stroke, ulcer, stomach, you name it. And probably some of us are suffering from that now. In the early 2000s, a study showed that people working 60, 65 hours a week are twice as likely to have a coronary than those working the normal 40 hours. Now, I don't know who's working normal 40 hours. I don't know anybody like that. But that's what the data suggests. Now, here's a key one. If you're getting less than 8 hours of sleep, if you're getting 6 hours of sleep or less, only 2 nights a week, only 2 nights a week, 6 hours or less, that figure goes up 3 times. You're 3 times as likely to have a coronary. Sleep matters. Rest matters. Right? It's not just about sleep, it's about the rest. Now listen to this. Too often, these symptoms of stress and overload are seen by the victim, you and me, simply as obstacles to performance and success, or sometimes even a lack of strength, ego, and pride that we ignore or merely want to get rid of or overcome without recognizing or accepting the cause. We're self-deceived. Dr. Archibald Hart, Stress and Adrenaline, look him up, says, seldom, though predictable, does the disease of overstress slow the victim, you and me, down until the final blow is struck. And the ulcer, the stroke, the heart attack, the depression, the burnout, and often the moral failure that accompanies it falls in. Here's what happened to me, for what it's worth. We came back to the United States from Africa. I was asked to take this global position for World Vision of leadership and organizational development. And I said, by God, I'm going to do that job. I'm going to do it better than anybody's ever done it. Get the heck out of my way. Here I come, right? And sure enough, man, I was going after it. And I was working from home. I had the privilege of living in Colorado, office in California, and my home office was in my basement. The good news was the commute was short. The bad news was I never left the office. So I found myself getting up earlier and earlier, worshiping at the altar of email, and then staying up later and later, trying to get on those conference calls globally and time zones and so forth. But man, I was getting after it, right? Here I come. Then all of a sudden, I woke up one morning and I had this excruciating pain in my jaw. Man, I was dizzy, it was painful, and I thought, man, I don't have time for this. I got a busy day here. I got conference calls. I got important emails to respond to. I called up Dr. Jager's office. I said, look, tell Dr. Jager I need a prescription for some antibiotics. I've obviously got some kind of infection going on in my jaw. I don't have time to see him. I'm going to swing by the office and get my prescription. So I go driving over to Dr. Jager's office. I go in, I say, where's my prescription? Well, Sam, as a matter of fact, Dr. Jager's had an appointment canceled, and he'd like to see you before he writes that prescription. I said, I don't have time. I go in, I sit down, I said, can't you just write me the prescription? No, Sam, just let me take a look. Takes a look, he does x-rays, he comes back, he says, Sam, there's no infection in your jaw. He says, that's stress causing that pain. I said, I'm not stressful, give me that prescription. Literally. I marched out of his office, I jumped into my Jeep, I slammed the door, I screeched the tires, I went over to the dentist, David Jones, a friend of mine. I marched in, I said, look, I don't need to see David, just tell him I need a prescription for some antibiotics. I have obviously got some abscess in my tooth going on here, just get the prescription for him. She comes out, she said, well, Sam, as a matter of fact, he's had an appointment canceled, he'd like to see you. I go in, I said, David, can't you? No, let me take a look, Sam. He takes x-rays again, the whole 9 yards. He comes back, he says, Sam, there's no infection. You have no abscess. He says, that's stress causing that pain. Now, if he hadn't been my friend, I think I'd have come out of that chair and grabbed him by the neck. That's how wound up I was. That's how self-deceived I was. Me, Sam Voorhies, stress causing pain in my body? No way. Hey, I'm in control. Right? Dr. Jones, David Jones, started asking me some very personal questions. He was a friend of mine. You know, Sam, how's your, tell me about your day. When do you start work and when do you knock off? And when do you close the computer? And Sam, what have you been doing on the weekends lately? And when's the last time you took a real vacation? And I mean, on and on. I did not have the courage to tell him the truth, but I think he knew the truth. And of course, I knew the truth, right? I knew the truth. Then one night, I was downstairs working in my office trying to finish this important email. My daughter, who was about 8 years old, came down. I gave her that mean look, don't bother Daddy now, he needs to finish this important email. Being my daughter, she ignored that mean look and came closer. I gave her a meaner look. Come, I gotta concentrate. Being my daughter, she kept on coming. I'm trying to finish, I'm getting aggravated. Finally, she gets on my lap and she sits and she's facing me. And now I'm really aggravated, I'm trying to finish this email. She grabs me by the shoulders. Daddy, Daddy, look at me. Okay, you got my attention, I'm looking at you. Daddy, I'm more important than these emails. Talk about a stab in the heart. And then only as my daughter could do if you knew her, she then looked at me and said, after all, look at you. You spend so much time on the computer, you have a computer face. I don't know what a computer face is, but I had it. Friends, servant leadership starts with you, leading from within. Recognize that you are the one that has to change. Accept that you're likely to be self-deceived. Be ready to change. An ancient proverb says this, do you see a person who is wise in their own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for them. And then another ancient proverb, 15 says, if you accept the gift of feedback from others, you will be at home among the wise. My prayer for you today as we continue this journey of servant leadership, leading from within, is that you would be at home among the wise. It starts with you, leading from within. Thank you.